We return to our top story, President Trump's surprise acceptance of the offer from North Korea's leader, Kim Jong Un, to meet. We examine what's at stake with Michael Pillsbury. He's been advising the Trump administration on Korea. He's also a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute, where he directs the Center for Chinese Strategy. And Sung-Yoon Lee is an assistant professor of Korean studies at Tufts University. And we welcome both of you to the program. Thank you very much. Michael Pillsbury, to you first. Should President Trump have agreed to this meeting?
Yes, absolutely. I think the issue, though, is whether there should be conditions attached that the North Koreans have to fulfill before the trip happens. As you know, the president was very clear that the date and the place are yet to be negotiated. So his agreement to the meeting is subject to quite a few other decisions being made. But overall, this is really a chance for him to become a great president in foreign policy. I wouldn't rule out the Nobel Peace Prize and all kinds of breakthroughs, but we're in the very first phase of this today.
Sung-Yoon Lee, should the president have done this?
Well, how to ascertain, how to understand Kim Jong Un's sudden dramatic outreach as of New Year's Day? Most likely he didn't wake up on New Year's Day and had a moment of epiphany and decided he's going to be a nice guy heretofore. More likely is the fact that Kim does feel the pinch from meaningful sanctions enforcement built up over the past year. But more likely than that, this was all premeditated, pre-planned. It's certainly not unprecedented. Kim is taking a page out of his daddy's playbook from the year 2000.
That's true.
That year in June, Kim Jong-il held the first ever inter-Korean summit with the South Korean president, who, we found out later, had paid Kim Jong-il $500 million for the privilege of making that pilgrimage to Pyongyang. And then after having softened up South Korea, he turned to the United States and sent, and this was unprecedented, a special envoy to the U.S. president. So Vice Marshal Cho, the highest-ranking military man next only to Kim, visited Washington in early October, conveying the message of invitation to President Kim from his boss. And Clinton was amenable to actually making the visit. He was keen on it and sent his Secretary of State, Madeleine Albright, and there she was 3 weeks later toasting Kim Jong-il. So don't be surprised if Kim, in the weeks ahead, in trying to persuade President Trump to actually make the visit, send the first sister, his sister who charmed people, melted hearts and minds when she just showed up and flashed a few smiles in the South.
But just to move ahead, it sounds as if Michael Pillsbury, Professor Lee, is saying this could just be a trap, that it's the beginning of something that won't lead anywhere.
Yes, well, he's stealing my lines. I was going to tell you the story of 2000 and the decision then that President Clinton made that he would not accept the invitation to go to Pyongyang. Instead, he would send Madeleine Albright, who then advised him not to make the trip because the chances for real progress did not exist. So he's quite rightly pointing out this experience from 2000 that I think affects the Trump team as they think about what to do next. Is why they want to have some conditions before they go.
Well, let me ask you right now, what should those conditions be? We heard the president's press secretary, Sarah Sanders, say today that certain actions have to be taken if this meeting is going to take place.
The Trump White House has not spelled out the conditions yet. They've implied that at least what the South Koreans brought from their meetings have to be implemented. So there's a certain amount of uncertainty, which is very common in diplomacy, as you know, about exactly what North Korea has to do. It's not an unconditional promise that I'll meet you somewhere in the world and we'll have dinner. It's more than that. And both sides now are going to have a secret channel to discuss what exactly are these conditions.
Well, we don't know what those conditions are, but Professor Lee, if those conditions include, for example, certainly no nuclear testing, no belligerent moves, is North Korea prepared to do that? How far do you think North Korea is prepared to go to have this meeting take place?
Well, you see, North Korea has conditioned the world to really lower the bar when it comes to engaging North Korea. What Kim conveyed to President Trump through the South Korean envoys is that now he is amenable to talking about denuclearization and that he will not conduct any missile or nuclear tests. In the meantime, those activities, of course, we know are prohibited by more than 10 UN Security Council resolutions. So the mere utterance of abstention from illicit activities is no concession at all. Fortunately, we have the Cliffs Notes, preconditions for suspending and terminating sanctions, which are codified in the sanctions legislation that was signed into law by President Obama 2 years ago. Sections 401,
Right.
402, they explicitly state the preconditions, which are North Korea has to make a meaningful step toward denuclearization, stop censoring the North Korean people, release foreign detainees, abide by the international
But we don't-
norms, or
if I'm-
as a recipient nation,
I was just going to say, if I may interrupt,
as an aid
because
recipient nation. Yeah.
just to move this along, because we only have a few minutes left here.
Those
Michael,
aren't the
we don't-
conditions. Those aren't the conditions that the Trump White
That this
House is
White
talking
House
about.
is gonna-
He's
is
talking
gonna-
about something quite different.
But do you, I mean, to get to something more fundamental,
Sure.
Michael Pillsbury, does anyone in the White House believe that Kim Jong Un is actually prepared to dismantle his nuclear program?
It depends how you define dismantle. The Trump White House has some very experienced talent matched by people at State and Defense and CIA. They've been through the history of the mistakes, the deception, the errors. They've got a vision, as I understand it, which will be worked out. One of the issues, for example, is where will this meeting take place? Should it be in Switzerland, where the North Korean leader can see where he went to school?
Does that really matter that much?
It
where
matters
takes
if it's
place?
Beijing. I happen to support Beijing because I believe China is our partner in this. It's quite important today that the Trump White House and the Chinese released two different versions of what happened in the phone call today between Xi Jinping and President Trump. The Chinese view is that they are irreplaceable, they're part of this. I get the impression they'd be happy to host the summit in Beijing and then help us with implementation. The other idea is to go to the DMZ in the big, long building there. So that's one of maybe 5 or 6 major decisions yet to be worked out.
A lot to be worked out.
But we've started. President Trump has started. That's the good news.
Professor Lee, Sung-Yoon Lee, let me just quickly come back to you. Do you believe the North is prepared to go ahead with denuclearization, to dismantle its nuclear program?
Well, in the history of denuclearization, only 4 nations that possess nuclear weapons have bargained them away. And in each of those instances, following a regime change, a new leader. The former Soviet republics, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and Belarus, in the early 90s, bargained them away. So did South Africa when it ended its oppressive, systematic racial repression.
No. South
North
Africa
Korea
did
is a
not bargain them
7-decade-old
away. South
dynasty.
Africa gave them away unilaterally.
Well,
that's closer to the North Korean model that we're hoping
Due to
for.
sanctions enforcement and a lot of international pressure. We have not seen the kind of meaningful sanctions enforcement that Obama implemented against Iran in getting Iran back to the negotiating table. It took 5 years. Billions of dollars in fines were levied against friendly nations, the biggest bank in France.
But
nothing on that scale has been tried against China's state-owned enterprises and banks.
Professor Lee, I think your point is that it's difficult, that the example North Korea sees is that it doesn't necessarily pay to dismantle one's
And the
nuclear
good
program.
news is
Much more to talk about here. We are
One sentence of good news. Xi and Trump agreed today the sanctions remain in place up to the meeting. So there's no purchase of this meeting by
China
softening of
sanctions and other sanctions remain in
Yes.
place. Much more to talk about. We are going to be coming back to this a lot between now and the time that this meeting may or may not take place. Michael Pillsbury here, Professor Sung-Yoon Lee, thank you very much.